The Sony ZV-E1 overheats. It doesn't have dual SD card slots. It's not professional. That's true. Kinda. Let's talk about this camera and how it best serves today's content creator and find out if it's really worth adding to your kit. You see, although this camera is questionable in a pro setting, you can't ignore that it provides pro-like results, especially in a much more compact form factor. I've owned this camera for the past month, and although the camera is far from perfect, it's close to meeting that balance of having the smallest setup while also still getting the highest quality image, or at least choosing or having that option to have the highest quality image. Look, it's about the same as my Sony a6400, but unlike my Sony a6400, the ZV-E1 has a full frame sensor which gives us more bokeh and also another stop of light, which will help in dark and low light situations as it shares the same sensor as the Sony a7S III and FX3, which are both excellent low light cameras. If you're shooting your videos manually, your best ISOs are going to be at 640 and 12,800. Just adjust your exposure accordingly from there. But if you're going to shoot in auto mode, it sure does a good job of keeping the image consistent without shifting the bright and dark parts. So you can pretty much focus on your shot without worrying too much about camera settings. It's a win for both cams. Excellent image? Check. But what's it like to actually use this camera? It has the flip screen, the microphone port, the built-in directional microphone with 3 modes, front, rear, and omnidirection, plus headphone jack to accurately check your video sound. Similar to the other ZV cameras, on top of this one, we get a much simplified button layout for the photos, videos, and S&Q mode. For those of you who are used to having more buttons on the Sony full-frame cameras, or even their Sony FX30, you may not like the ZV-E1. But before you start getting discouraged about having a lack of custom buttons, consider having quick access buttons, at least on the touchscreen. This is in addition to the function menu. We have the exposure mode where you can still access the other modes like program mode, aperture priority, and shutter priority mode. You can switch on the timer mode if we need, select a specific direction for recording audio, quick access to the Cine Vlog option, another record button, product showcase which turns off the face tracking temporarily to focus on subjects or objects close to the camera, can cycle through specific subjects for autofocus tracking, quickly zoom if needed, and another playback button. If you don't like this menu, you can also hide it, no worries. Personally, since using a combination between the touch screen, the function menu, and main menu, I haven't really noticed that there is a lack of custom buttons. And if you want to reprogram any already existing buttons, then you can still do that. If you are an experienced content creator who knows their camera, it's reasonable to desire a more pro experience with a balance of actual useful features, especially for its price, which we'll mention later. Although it only has one SD card slot, it's not the end of the world. I can't speak for everyone, but for the past couple years of active use, many of my cards have yet to experience SD card failures. However, if I'm shooting for a client with a camera body with one SD card slot, I also bring along another camera like the Sony FX30 for redundancy, so I don't depend on only one SD card. If there's any real worry about this camera, it's the overheating. Fellow content creator Lee Zavitz claimed being able to shoot 4K 24 for 4 hours while charging. I just didn't have such fortune. When I shot 4K 24, I initially got somewhere around 45 minutes before it overheated. But when I went back to the menu, I realized that I was shooting on the brightest setting, which is sunny weather. So when I reverted it back to the default brightness of 0, I got about 50 minutes of 4K 24. On another occasion, an hour. But when shooting in 1080, I got 3 hours of recording while charging, all before getting the overheating signal and just before running out of space on my SD card. If you want to be safe and practically shoot in 4K with this camera, consider filming in bursts rather than having long takes. But if you do long takes, also consider taking breaks. 1080 is more than enough coming from a premium camera like this. So if you really need long form recording, just upscale to 4K later. Despite these two features holding back this camera, is there anything else noteworthy about it to even make it worthy for your kit? Aside from the hype features of the cinematic vlog mode with presets, maybe the AI in this camera could make you think about buying this camera. Like the $3,900 Sony a7R V, this camera has the AI to track your face even from the back of your head. And unlike previous Sony cameras from the entry level to the pro level, this camera gives you the option to track different subjects from insects, planes, and more. I really don't have use for tracking other subjects that aren't people, but a more practical use of this AI in this camera is to use it for tracking the faces and eyes of my subjects even while using clear image zoom. Again, another feature not in other Sony cameras. I use it often when using my smaller APS-C lenses on this camera. So if you want to save on full frame glass by using your APS-C glass, this is the way. To take it a step further though, if you're tired of filming yourself, the AI in this camera can help with that. This will be ideal for the behind the scenes content where the camera is able to track you and follow you around in a frame. This only works in 4K, so just compose your frame that you want to be followed in and program the amount of crop that you want. So for a tighter angle, use a large crop, and if you want a wider angle, use a small crop. As long as you're not too far or too close, the AI's tracking will stick to you. I'll have a more dedicated video on this, so subscribe and keep an eye on that. With or without AI, there's no doubt that you'll grow into my personal favorite feature, which is having the user LUTs. Instead of spending time color grading, have the color grade burned into your video beforehand. And if you don't know what LUTs are, or lookup tables, they're like presets, but only manipulate the colors and tones. If you're looking to get a better image other than the presets that come with the cinematic vlog mode, consider loading in your own LUTs, or LUTs of others. But if you still want to use LUTs without burning them into your image, we can still shoot in log mode or in S-Log3 and have the ability to color correct and color grade in post. I personally use the LUTs of Joel Famularo and find them excellent. But if you still find yourself to be a hybrid shooter taking photos and video often, then you'll be confident shooting with this full frame low light beast. Even with 12 megapixels, the quality is just excellent. If you think you need more megapixels, well, you already know your needs then. For social media, you won't be able to tell the difference between megapixels, and 12 should be more than sufficient. And when you're ready for video, you'll be shooting 4K at 60 frames per second and even 120 frames per second without any crop, unlike the A7 IV. But anyway, the 4K 120 is supposed to be released through an update in the near future. But in the meantime, 4K 60 frames per second will suffice. So who is this camera best for? This camera is awesome for someone upgrading from the Sony a6000 series cameras, looking to maintain that similar form factor but having a huge upgrade in specs and performance. I mean, look at it. It's a similar form factor without the viewfinder, and it's only 80 grams heavier as a full frame camera. For pros, you're better off with the Sony FX30 as a more reliable camera for your video needs at a similar price point with the XLR top handle. If after watching this review you consider yourself a more photo person, consider the A7 IV for photos and sometimes video. For more casual and prosumer shooters, for $2,000 you can keep your a6000 series camera or ZV-E1 and invest in 2 to 3 solid lenses or even a new light with a modifier. But if you want the latest and greatest and are considering consolidating your kit for this camera with the right lens, this camera may be well worth it. For professionals outside of social media, this may be a hard pass for you as your current cameras most likely meet your needs. You would just want those smart AI features to trickle down into your already existing pro cameras, like what Sony has already done with the Sony a7R5. For $2,200, if you're looking for pro features and a compact body only, this is the best vlog camera you can get. It's a high entry point for an everyday camera, but it's justifiable if you also create content on the regular. For me, I don't regret selling one of my Sony FX30s for this, as it has already provided the balance that I've been looking for in an everyday camera that excels in video features. Now, just the lens, and more Sony ZV-E1 content over here. Till then, go out there and shoot for the life that matters. See ya.